Surprise! Welcome to the latest edition of Live After Smackdown Live. My name is 14 Fitzpatrick, filling in for Tanya Rogers, who is going to be doing the Smackdown recap and reaction, filling in for Andrew Swift, who's currently watching his beloved Cleveland Indians be crushed by the Chicago Cubs in Game 6. So, this came together at the very last minute. I had a couple hours to organize this show, and I brought together somebody who's wanted to be on one of these podcasts for a very long time. Broadcasting live from the Wyatt family compound, it's Duke.
Yeah, you can tell that I forgot not to shave for this one. But the whole film, first off, thank you, Tanya and Andrew, for letting us fill in here. But it's kind of ironic that they've got the two of us doing this the week before both shows go to Europe, because, as you may remember, whenever Raw and SmackDown go to Europe, there's always this feeling that they have, it's almost like, we're forgetting to tape one last show, aren't we? We better leave a skeleton crew behind to make sure that we get that covered. And so here we are, the skeleton crew, to cover one last SmackDown before the big show in Scotland next week.
Yes, and that's a very, very big show. Thank you once again, Tanya, Sean, Andrew, for allowing us to do this show. And we start things off with, well, let's put it this way. James Ellsworth currently right now is, well, he was a dead man at the start of the show. He wanted to issue a public apology to Mr. Dean Ambrose, who is not happy with him, to say the least, after Ellsworth got Dean disqualified in the WWE #1 Contenders match that Dean was a part of, facing AJ Styles. So Ellsworth starts the show, and he wants to publicly apologize to Dean. And Dean comes out, and he's like, "Oh, hey, man, it's fine. I could rip your head off, but okay, it's cool." Literally.
He literally said that he spent a night thinking about all the ways to kill Ellsworth before his temper calmed down. It was one of the more Dean Ambrose moments of the show, and it was full of them. He was full Dean Ambrose today.
Yes, full Dean Ambrose. So actually, this was a shockingly good show for him, and he carried his segment really well until AJ Styles decided to show up and twist the knife a little bit.
Yeah, he started by saying basically, why is Ambrose being so friendly when this is the person who cost you your dream? Then turned it to Ellsworth, and it was really cool the way they had the two of them positioned. You could see Ellsworth between the other two, and somebody in the Daily, for those who don't go there, it's basically a hangout where everybody is completely free to talk about whatever they want. We have one rule: don't be stupid. That's where the two of us got to meet Tanya and Swifty. One of the things that was noted was the way that AJ was standing. If I were to show it from the camera, he'd be standing right here, basically over Ellsworth's left shoulder. And at the same time, you had Ambrose on this side. And the imagery had to be intentional, that you have Ellsworth, this everyman, caught in the middle of a big war between a clear bad guy and a clear good guy. And anyone who's seen any children's cartoon remembers how somebody stuck in the middle will have a little angel on this shoulder, a little devil on this shoulder, and the two of them will start arguing with each other. You kind of got that feeling, that sort of illusion that was going on as AJ Styles was saying, don't listen to him. He's using you to get what you want. And you should be thanking me for getting you what you want, because I got mad enough to be disqualified. So I got you this win, and I got you all of this publicity. And then just when you think he has a point, he says, and I'd like a cut of your merchandise sales, please, which just totally wrecks the mood. It was really good imagery, really good talk from AJ Styles, and it led to Ambrose confronting him, and then Ellsworth more literally getting between the two, as though he at 5'7" is going to do anything to stop these two from fighting each other.
Yeah, and then, of course, at the end segment there, AJ is attacking Ambrose, and Ellsworth gets used as a human missile by AJ to beat up Dean Ambrose. And that was a really good way to end the segment with Ellsworth still tearful, still trying to be apologetic, but once again, AJ uses Ellsworth to his advantage against Dean.
Yeah, and after this segment, this is something that I said I wanted to repeat it here just because I was told it was a really good comment. One of the things about this main event storyline, if they're really targeting the kids, you want to create characters that kids can relate to. And all three of these characters, Styles, Ambrose, and Ellsworth, are archetypes that I guarantee you kids have seen in school. You have in AJ Styles the guy who is at the top, knows he's the best, but has the problem of just annoying everyone with how good he is and how good he says he is. You have in Dean Ambrose the guy who really means well but has that short fuse, and you're always afraid that if you do one thing wrong, you're going to set that short fuse off. And you have in James Ellsworth the man who is in over his head, who is sort of the little pet of the big kids, and is now caught in a place he really can't get out of. And I guarantee you, every kid who's watching this knows an AJ Styles, knows a Dean Ambrose, and knows a James Ellsworth from that segment. And that is how you connect to make a new audience with relatable characters, even with inside the different universe that wrestling is.
Yeah, I agree with you there, because here you have three relatable characters. You have AJ, who's the obnoxious jock. You have Dean, who's the guy who loiters around the 7-Eleven parking lot.
Yeah.
And then you have Ellsworth, who's the guy that gets trapped in the locker. And add to that, you have guidance counselor Mr. Bryan to complete a trifecta of 4 characters interacting with one another at basically the same time.
SmackDown Live is so good, by the way, they can pack 4 people into a trifecta.
Yes. Would it be what exactly would it be? Because trifecta is 3 people, right?
Right. I think the term in horse racing is the superfecta, but at this point, I probably don't want to say too much in case the feds are listening in.
Okay. So yeah, after this, we had a segment backstage, and SmackDown is using their backstage segments incredibly well. You have Ellsworth still tearful and trying to apologize to Dean, and Daniel Bryan, like the school guidance counselor, like I said, is breaking this thing up and says, Ellsworth, do not interfere in this last chance that Dean has. Dean has a last chance to become the champion of the WWE champion. If he beats AJ Styles tonight, then he gets that #1 contendership back, and he gets to face AJ Styles. And what was announced later is TLC is going to be the grudge.
And we'll get to that when we get to the talking smack portion. I think the big thing is, and this was something I just that was just now thought of, but I wonder if with Daniel Bryan's delivery, do you think he was keeping Ellsworth away more for Ambrose's benefit or more for Ellsworth's benefit? Because I guarantee you that if Ellsworth, had Ellsworth been out there and been a bit of a factor, it would be to his own detriment. Whereas, obviously, he can say, on the surface, I'm telling you this for Dean's sake, which is something that really all good mentors do, is they don't come out and be honest that they are trying to correct you. They come out and say, I want you to listen, and, hypothetically, I'm not really saying this about you, but I am.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it's like he's trying to do this. He's trying to save Ellsworth because he brought Ellsworth on this show. Basically, it also continues the sub-story of Daniel Bryan and his interpersonal failings, as it were. He brought Ellsworth onto the SmackDown brand, and now Ellsworth is causing a really big issue with the main event scene with this interfering in Dean Ambrose's match.
Yeah, if you'll allow me to go full Tanya here for a second, well, not even full Tanya, but partial Tanya here. This really shows the difference between how the SmackDown authorities are used and how the Raw authorities are used. Both Mick Foley and Daniel Bryan are presented as being inexperienced in their job, obviously. Daniel Bryan is the head of a brand for the first time. Mick Foley is in charge for the first time in, I believe, 15 years at this point. And the difference is they're showing Mick Foley as being in over his head, but they're not letting him in on the joke. They're sort of presenting this as a story that's hanging out there and hanging out there, and they're not really having him follow up on it. They're not having him realize he's making mistakes, and it goes back. It makes you wonder if he even watching his own show at the end to critique himself. Whereas with Daniel Bryan, like you said, he brought Ellsworth in, and he brought Ellsworth in basically as a lark at AJ Styles' expense, and now Ellsworth has been dragged back in by AJ Styles 3 weeks ago. Now Ambrose is getting on Ellsworth's side, and all of this, Bryan is thinking, what have I started? This kid isn't ready for where he's being dragged. I've got to find a way to save him. So you have on one side, Foley not sure how to fix his problems, not even sure they are problems. The other side, you have Bryan showing growth in the position, deciding to fix his problems as they come up. And it is a big change because it makes the authority figure, as we said earlier, relatable. That guidance counselor that you talk about.
Yeah, basically, he's the big guidance counselor on campus right now. And this is becoming a really interesting angle as we see later on in the show, another segment involving Daniel Bryan. He becomes a character that is incredibly relatable to his struggles. And you have Dean wanting his last chance. He's desperate to get it. And we also have Ellsworth trying to basically apologize for whatever he's done. And he's not really sure how to do that. But as we see later on the show, we find out what exactly he's capable of.
Right, yeah. We figure out that he knows his weaknesses and he exploits them, for lack of a better term.
So after this, we have a no disqualification match that really was just basically a setup angle to continue on the mystical, and I feel like I'm one of the few people who likes this feud, Randy Orton versus Kane. And this was a decent match for the short time period it was. One thing that we should note beforehand is that most of the matches on this show were really short, but they told a lot of story.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with short matches in a vacuum. I know that Raw feels like they have to fill the time because they have a limited roster and a long show, so some of the matches tend to drag a little. But there's nothing wrong with a match that goes exactly as long as it needs to get the point across, and we saw that a lot tonight.
Yeah, and this match had Wyatt interference, and Bray Wyatt and Luke Harper came at ringside. Orton won with the RKO due to a Wyatt distraction, and Bray begins to feel like he has some control over Orton somehow. Like, a lot of people in the thread have said that Bray is basically a inept wizard, and somehow one of his spells has actually worked this time. That he's finally managed to corrupt somebody onto his side.
Well, I've seen that. I've also seen the one that I liked more because I don't know if I'd say it makes more sense, but it certainly adds more intrigue, which is that Bray Wyatt is so desperate to believe his own hype that he's willing to accept that Randy Orton is falling under his spell, while Randy Orton is thinking he's got Bray Wyatt walking right into the trap. And here's Luke Harper on the side realizing things are going to turn into a train wreck, trying to stop it and having no control whatsoever because Wyatt is so used to having Harper as a subordinate.
Yeah, I mean, Harper is suddenly in a position where he's based. I said this last week, oddly enough. Harper is now in the position of going, boss, he's a snake. I don't trust him. And they did that segment where Harper's looking over at Orton going, I know your game. You betray people. Just ask Legacy. Just ask, the Nexus. Just ask everybody who's associated with Randy Orton. It always
just ask Evolution if you want to go back far enough.
Yeah, Evolution. And Orton's betrayed people before. And Harper knows this, but Bray doesn't just seem to understand because somebody's finally revering him as a god. He's so happy about that.
It reminds me, and here we go with, for those who want to keep score to a drinking game at home, take a drink every time I come up with a really bizarre pop culture reference. Here's one for you. The movie Devil's Advocate with Keanu Reeves and Al Pacino ends with Pacino as the devil. His final line is vanity. my favorite sin. And you're looking at Bray Wyatt, and he's thinking, I got someone. And that's vanity, and that will come back to haunt him if, in fact, this is a trap being set by Randy Orton.
Yeah, and I think that Kane might be in on it too, because he's taken losses before to set up a trap. That's also part of his MO.
And let's not forget, the last time Bray Wyatt thought he had someone and was mistaken was almost 3 years ago with Daniel Bryan, and the counter trap that was sprung by Bryan was brought about by a cage match on Raw. Daniel Bryan and Bray Wyatt fought to be allies against the Usos in a steel cage, and there was a special bit about it, which is the cage was chained and padlocked, and the only key belonged to then corporate member Kane. A lot of people thought Kane was actually a deep spy for Daniel Bryan after that little setup. So it's not like Kane hasn't seen Bray Wyatt fall for his own arrogance before.
Yeah, I mean, Kane has seen it happen firsthand. You know, Kane was Bray Wyatt's first feud in Sacrifices. Bray tried to gain Kane and The Undertaker's powers.
That's also true. Yeah, good point.
Mm-hmm. So there's this interconnected history between all of these parties, and we now have a situation where Wyatt's biggest follower might turn out to be his biggest enemy down the line, in what we've been saying for weeks now. You know, Harper possibly turning on Bray, or Bray turning on Harper. It will be really interesting to see. As I've said, I've had a wait-and-see idea about this feud for the longest time, and I'm continuing to do the wait-and-see thing until we get to the point where, okay, this is where it's going to go, and I'm pretty excited as to where it's going at this point.
Yeah, the nice thing about something like this, and you don't see it as much on Raw, you do see it quite a bit on a show like Lucha Underground or NXT compared to Raw or TNA, which is you can kind of see, okay, this is slow progress, but they're putting another domino down, and another one, and another one, and you're just waiting for the show where they finally push that first domino, and everything falls over in spectacular fashion.
Right, indeed. And, well, that was another thing that happened. The next match that occurred was a tag team match, or as I call it, the All Japan Tag Team Rumble.
Vikings, this is for you, man. We got the queens.
Yes, we've got the queens, we've got the bootleg Nikki Bella, and we've got the incredible Pixie Hulk, all in one tag team match. Once again, it was another short match, but it made its point across. Becky Lynch got beat by Alexa, and then there was if people were worried that they weren't going to give Alexa Bliss the mic at first, but they've given her the mic the last few weeks, and she's just knocked it out of the park. If it weren't for the fact that a certain someone in a Mr. Rogers Neighborhood suit cut the promo of a lifetime tonight, I think Alexa Bliss would be in the clubhouse for best person on promos right now.
Yeah, and we'll get to that other one later. We'll get to that other segment later because, believe it or not, the way we're describing it, about 3 different segments could have been the highlight of the night, and about 3 different ones could lead off the SmackDown recap once it's up. The really cool thing about the start of that promo with Alexa and Carmella, they almost were into self-parody or parody of what women are sort of expected to be in wrestling. I don't know if you noticed, but they had sort of a bubbly, hyperactive beginning to their interview with each other, I guess is the best way to put it, before everybody settled in and started playing their characters, playing their roles. You had Carmella throwing shade at Raw because somebody has to hype Survivor Series at this point, I guess. And then you had Alexa go from being smiles about winning to just this disgusted look on her face. And nobody changes facial expressions that well, that fast like Alexa does.
I mean, I brought up an example last week of when she was drafted onto SmackDown and they did the post promo, that little 1 minute, 50-second clip of interview. In the last 30 seconds, she changed her facial expression like that. She went from being her real life person to being this absolute monster. And this absolute monster is happy with this victory, but it wasn't for the belt. It was in a tag match. She wants more. She wants that final step. She wants that women's championship so badly. And she talks about fairy tales all the time, but she's really being motivated by fairy tales. You know,
And she brought up a specific one this time around, the fairy tale of Snow White, and to pardon the pun, that one had a very grim outcome for everyone involved.
yes, it did. It did have a very. If you don't read the Disney version and you go with the ones that were published, those fairy tales are very grim. So she's going to some dark places to get some really nice inspiration because she basically is a fairy tale character to an extent, but she also reminds me a lot now of an evil version of. Have you ever heard of the book Pippi Longstocking?
Yes, Astrid Lindgren. I saw the movies. I loved it.
Yes. And Fizzy does the whole references thing. I take a literature reference, and she basically is an evil version of Pippi Longstocking. She even wears red highlights.
Pigtails, yes.
Yes. The pigtails, and she's as strong as an ox.
Mm-hmm. And it's just kind of strange to see really somebody possessing a monstrous personality who is 5'1", or comes across that way, certainly standing next to the other women on the show. It makes you it just makes her seem larger and more dangerous than somebody of her size really should be. And one of the things that they're doing very well, this seems kind of strange to bring up, but when you look at how on Raw you get Charlotte and Sasha, and they'll be hanging out with the guys, because try to establish the narrative there that women are now one of the guys on Raw, which hey, that's their narrative; they can run with it. Alexa has not been seen with anyone other than other women. Even when interviewed, she was interviewed by Dasha Fuentes tonight, not by not by Tom Phillips or something like that. And they're trying to hide the fact, I think, that we're dealing with somebody that genetics was not very kind to when it came to size, because she projects herself as being so much bigger, stronger, and more of a challenge. And why ruin the illusion?
Well, I'm not really sure that they're defacing an illusion. I mean, Alexa reminds me of my own mother. My own mother is short, like Alexa.
My apologies if Alexa reminds you of your mother.
Oh no, they're different. They're different people, as they just people that have to project themselves in a big room, just stand out because they are so short. And Alexa projects herself like a 7-foot tall monster. There's actually a Twitter picture of a mixed tag match that they had down in NXT with her and her former colleagues Blake and Murphy versus Enzo and Cass. And this picture has Cass standing on one side of the wing, backing away as Alexa is legitimately roaring at him.
That there is something to be said about that. If you've ever hung out with dogs, you know that the small ones are the ones who are the most aggressive.
Yeah, you have to be, because you have that size disadvantage. Although in reality, being short is actually really good in a fight because it's harder for people to put you down.
I guess. I mean, I wouldn't know. I'm 6'3", so.
I mean, my mother used to do crisis interventions back in the 1980s, so she's well versed in taking people down to the ground, crazy people and whatnot, and it pays to be short in those situations. And
get low to the ground first, be able to take the legs first. I can see that. And getting back on topic with the tag match, and especially building towards. And I've mentioned this before. I'm a little nervous about how much stock is going to be put in next week's show. They piped up Becky and Alexa as basically the only previewed match, the only main event on that show. But at least in the U.S., remember, one, it's not really live. If it were live, either it's a matinee show over in Scotland or it's on at 2 in the morning here. I doubt they're going to do that. And in fact, with Raw, the precedent has been that you put the show on same-day tape at the very best. And two, there's something kind of important happening next Tuesday that everyone's going to be paying attention to. So I'm not sure whether they consider this something where they can experiment, or whether they are just willing to say, hey, no one's going to be watching anyway. Let's. I really don't know how they're going to go with it, but that I hope none of the ratings news comes into play, or looks badly upon Becky and Alexa. I hope that those two have a solid confrontation, that the Scottish crowd is behind them all the way. I really don't care. I mean, they could just be throwing punches and kicks all day as long as the crowd is fired up behind it. And I hope that it comes out entertaining one way or another.
Have you ever heard a European crowd before? They're always into stuff like this, especially this match when you have Becky who's representing them, and even though she's from Ireland, and you have this absolute monster on the other side, and this will turn out to be a really, really interesting match. And then the other feud got progressed as well. You have also the seeds of the potential Nikki versus Becky feud down the line with this tag match as well, because Nikki crashed into Becky during the match.
And that's always been something that's happened in tag team matches. Any miscommunication is supposed to be the harbinger of a future feud. It's very interesting that rarely do you see somebody just say, well, there's four of us, that happens.
Yeah. And Carmella is mending her fences because she knows she's going to have to go into war with Nikki. She wants Alexa back on her side, even though the two of them have been bitter enemies in the past.
Yeah, and I think, remember, it's now been almost a month and a half since Daniel Bryan said, the way these two are going, we're going to need a no disqualification match for the two of them. And so far, there hasn't been any sign that Nikki and Carmella are going to go anywhere but a no disqualification match.
Yeah, and it will be a really, really, I think it will be a good match because it plays to both of their strengths. Carmella is a good brawler, and Nikki can just hit the Bella Hammer and all of her various. She now has her new move. She now has a new submission maneuver to counter Carmella's.
Yeah, she learned the STF from her boyfriend or from her brother-in-law, or who knows where she learned it from. The point is, she has it.
Yes. Well, she learned it from her Master Mishiwa.
Who came down as a vision from above or something. No, wait. He was like that hologram. He was like the Force Ghost that Obi-Wan was. Just appeared in the middle of the Bella Mansion in the middle of the night and sent a message. This submission will help you from a certain point of view.
Well, my theory is that a green and silver lightning bolt hit Nikki Bella during a photo shoot in Japan, and she got embedded with all of his powers. like a Power Ranger.
Oh, there we go. Now all we need is for them to go back and for a Kabashi flavored lightning bolt to hit someone. Then we'll be complete.
Yes. But yeah, this was a really good segment. We both enjoyed it. And then we had two matches that set up things that went down the line because they also were doing Survivor Series team qualifier matches. And the first one up was... Actually, there was a segment beforehand. Backstage, Bryan and Shane were congratulating Naomi for being the fifth woman on the SmackDown Women's Survivor Series team.
Right, yeah.
And then she basically said, it's glow time and all that kind of stuff and went to go to a rave or something. And then the crazy cat lady arrived.
Natalia has fully steered into the skin of her cousin Teddy Hart and embraced the insanity that comes with owning way too many household pets. There's no other explanation for her. Well, I'm sure there's several others, but that really is sort of the quiet inside joke of Total Divas, is that TJ and Natalia are totally ribbing Teddy Hart with their cat obsession. Just trust me on this one, guys.
Yeah, I figure. And I'm not really sure what to think of the Hart family. I'm not the biggest fan of the family myself, but yeah, they decided to continue the cat thing, and then Natalia offered to be the trainer for the women's teams because she gets along with pretty much everybody, even though I think everybody hates her.
Yeah, there's no telling whether she thinks they all get along. So that's clear. And just as a side note here, one of the things that you can never get enough of in wrestling is a running gag. And off of last week's show, where she was quoting Whitney Houston, this week she quoted Aretha Franklin. And if it keeps up that she's quoting famous Motown female singers, I'm all for it.
Well, I'm not as versed in the world of music as you are, so I do know who Aretha Franklin is, but it's kind of vague to me. She was a performer in the 60s and 70s.
Went on for quite some time. She's considered basically the nickname is the Queen of Soul for her. She's probably the biggest female artist in Motown history. And the wrestling connection there, of course, is that she performed American the Beautiful before both WrestleManias 3 and 23 when they were held in Motown, Detroit.
Oh, right. Yeah, she did the entrances there. And speaking of the entrances, we got a very loud cheerleader entrance from the Spirit Squad.
I don't know how long Kenny held that ready at the beginning, but he was going on like 10, 15 seconds. It was amazing.
Yeah. Well, their opponents were American Alpha. We hadn't seen Alpha in a little bit, but now they're here and they're trying to qualify for the Survivor Series tag team thing, which you still don't know how exactly it's going to work, but they're in the team now because they beat the Spirit Squad in a fun, enjoyable short match. What are your thoughts on it, Duke?
It was a fun match. It was you didn't really expect American Alpha to have trouble with the Spirit Squad, and they had token trouble just because one of the big highlights of any American Alpha match is Jason Jordan coming in off of the tag and throwing people around like ragdolls. If it weren't for that, I don't think they would have even needed to have Chad Gable be in any trouble. But as it stood, American Alpha won pretty handily, and that's all you can really ask for. I mean, that's what it should be. With all due respect to Ken and Mike, they've definitely made the most out of their 15 minutes of fame, but everybody knew that American Alpha had to be on the team, and there they are. They're going to be part of the Survivor Series team. And one thing that was interesting is if you watched Raw, The New Day, who of course did a salute to the Three Faces of Charles Wright for Halloween, decided to talk about the teams on SmackDown. They mentioned Slater and Rhino. They mentioned the Hype Bros. They mentioned the Vaude Villains. And that's something to watch out for next week, mind you. They didn't really bring American Alpha up as much. And that's a sign that, because the other teams they brought up were in sort of a mocking tone. They might be taking American Alpha seriously. And let's face it, if it comes down to those two teams, I can tell you that when they did these matches in 87 and 88, it was if you were pinned, you and your partner were eliminated at the same time, and the last teams standing were the winners. So there's a chance that it could come down to a one-on-one, or I guess two-on-two if you want to be technical about it, of American Alpha versus New Day at the very end. And boy, wouldn't that be a fun little mini-match to close out that Survivor Series marathon.
Yeah, that would be a very fun match because you know that Slater and Rhino are going to have some kind of interference from one of these teams and to set something up down the line. And we don't know yet, but we know that another team made it in. But before then, we had a recap about Goldberg and Brock Lesnar, which cut us to our next segment, which was Mr. Miz's Neighborhood with his muscle Maurice in tow.
We'd like to thank Maurice, by the way, for wearing the tightest red dress known to man. It was so tight you could see her lead press-on nipples going through it.
I personally didn't really care about it. I was more cared about the fact that the guest was somebody who just got back from a lumberjack convention, Daniel Bryan.
So basically, a supermodel, a Mr. Rogers impersonator, and a lumberjack walked into a bar. So stop me if you've heard this story before.
Actually, I have never heard this story before, but please continue.
Oh, no, that's stop me if you've heard this one before is an old line when you're telling a standard setup for a joke. So there's not really anything to that other than just how weird everyone looked in the ring, especially when you consider, Miz and Maurice trying to present it as a legitimate show. You can see sort of the Merv Griffin or the Johnny Carson feel to it. Take a drink, everyone. where they're all in suits and where he's in a suit and tie and she's in her formal vest. And here comes Daniel Bryan dressed, like you said, like he just got out of the woods somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, probably going to James Ellsworth's house to bring him on into the arena or something.
or to take an axe to him and no, I know what he's doing. He's going into James Ellsworth's house, tying him to the bed, putting a block of wood between his legs, and hitting him with a sledgehammer.
That seems very Triple H of him to do.
Actually, it's from the movie Misery, so take another drink.
Oh, yeah, I understand that, but that seems like a very Triple H thing to do. I mean, because the McMahons are not letting him anywhere near the sledgehammers because sledgy is Triple H's thing.
Yeah, that's copyright infringement. Good point.
Yes. So that's where Triple H has been missing for the last few weeks. He's trying to find Sludgy because Daniel Bryan took him.
Okay, that's it. I am now picturing a Where's Waldo style book of Where's Sludgy.
So we have Daniel Bryan announcing the various people who are going to be in the Men's Survivor Series singles team, which is Randy Orton, who's been changed into a Wyatt disciple, Baron Corbin, who is the hero, Bray Wyatt, who thinks he's controlling Orton, Dean Ambrose, and...
At this point, Miz stands up, assuming he's the fifth guy, but no, it's...
AJ Styles.
And let's be honest, Miz, did you really think he'd leave AJ Styles off the team?
No, because I think Daniel Bryan didn't want to get himself hurt from AJ.
Yeah, seriously. Or just even that. You look, Raw has already put their champion and their top outside person in Owens and Jericho on the team. Of course, SmackDown is going to count it the same way. And I guess that's kind of what threw me is that the order in which Daniel Bryan announced them, and I know I'm nitpicking here, but I would have had it gone Styles, Ambrose, Wyatt, Orton, Corbin, so that Miz could legitimately think, okay, those four guys, yeah, they deserve to be on. But I do too. Wait, you're Baron Corbin? Are you kidding me?
Cue Baron Corbin's theme and Corbin walking out to try and murder Mr. Rogers.
Okay, show of hands or type into the comments how many people actually would love to see a Baron Corbin versus Miz match on SmackDown.
I would.
Yeah, I think it would work. I think that dynamic would really work because you have Corbin, who is a no-nonsense, straight-ahead Punisher, and you have Miz, who is a cerebral, really a stick-and-move guy. So, I think that would be a good match. Here we are doing exactly like Daniel Bryan does on Talking Smack. We're throwing out matches and seeing if they happen.
Yeah, and, Bryan said that Miz has no interest in letting Team Raw, he has no interest in leading Team SmackDown to victory. That, and SmackDown is full of opportunity for everyone who's not named Miz. Miz goes on a tirade, and he says that he lied. He did consider Miz, but Survivor Series teams are full of combustible elements, as we know, and they need superstars who aren't afraid to fight, who will fight anytime. And last week, Miz proved to Bryan that he's afraid to fight because Dolph offered him a rematch last week, and he turned it down because it wasn't on his terms. But
and this is some great continuity here, building between Miz and Bryan. Starting on Talking Smack, as Bryan says, Miz is too conservative a wrestler, too cautious a wrestler, and now Miz gives Bryan the opportunity to say, see, here's an example. I told you, you are too cautious in a match like this where everybody is at the top of their game. We can't have somebody being cautious. And as you can imagine, by the way, Miz is just about ready to blow a gasket at this point.
I think he already blew a gasket, and he cracked the cylinder head and then blew up the engine along the way while riding on the road at 70 miles per hour.
Yeah, that's not fire coming out of the top. That's his red jacket about to be thrown onto the mat.
Yeah, and, Miz suggests that they are just Bryan's terms and that they'll lead SmackDown to defeat. He says that Bryan is scared to fight. Ooh, that dagger.
And that eats Daniel Bryan inside because they've taken something from Total Bellas, they've taken something from what everybody must be thinking, and they've all made it officially part of Daniel Bryan and part of his GM character, which is that his career was cut short before he was ready, and it's through an invisible injury. And I know that times have changed. I know that there's more concussion awareness now in full contact sports, not just the WWE, but UFC and the NFL. But there's still this feeling in the locker room that if you look like you can fight, you should be able to fight. And that's something where Daniel Bryan now is torn because he knows that his doctors say he shouldn't go. The WWE medical staff and higher ups are giving him this job so that he has something to do that isn't trying to fight. And now Miz is calling him, is using fighting words, really, and saying, and this was a semi-direct quote, saying, "You're not man enough to do anything."
Yeah, and that stung, and he also did it well behind his muscle.
Oh, that was the best part. That was, for those who didn't see it, probably the best little characterization is, as Miz is saying, "You're not really a man," he pulls Maurice between the two of them.
And basically, Maurice is standing in front of him waiting to beat up Daniel Bryan because, as Zack Ryder's dad will tell you, Maurice is not exactly somebody you should be facing against.
Yeah, Maurice, let's not forget here, Maurice has about 5 years of WWE experience. She is not just someone that Miz picked up at an after party.
Yeah. She's actually, the devious co-schemer in Miz's game to try and destroy the deranged lawn gnome. And the deranged lawn gnome did go psychotic at the end by throwing a chair, which Reverend Kane quoted in the thread and saying, "That's physical. That counts as physical."
Yes. And let's just say, when Miz says that Bryan isn't man enough to do anything, I think Brie might disagree with that one.
Yeah.
But what came out of all of this was that Bryan finally said, "Miz, all you're doing is talk. All you are is talk. So I want you over there next to Ronaldo, next to JBL, next to Otunga, and you can talk all you want in this next match," which, by the way, is going to feature Dolph Ziggler defending his Intercontinental title in an open challenge against, somebody else. Was all he said.
Well, somebody else. And as the commercial break ended, that someone else came out. The man who apparently picked up his catchphrases from an ancient Chuck Norris fax books that's behind the back of a 7-Eleven, Kurt Hawkins.
Yeah, and this next part was used pretty well because they were putting a lot of time and effort into developing the Kurt Hawkins character as being somebody who was so egomaniacal. He thought he was an internet god along the lines of Chuck Norris. And all the while, of course, this disguises the fact that, according to recent scientific research, he's still Kurt Hawkins. He's still the lesser half of a tag team that included Zack Ryder.
Yeah, and when Mojo Rawley is a better partner than you were back in the day, then...
Oh.
I know there's going to be some Kurt Hawkins fans who are now going to be screaming at me going, "You just compared Mojo Rawley favorably to Kurt Hawkins?"
Yeah, the Kurt Hawkins fans, both of them are going to be responding to this one. So, and really the best part about this is it was paid off in the best way. You have somebody who you're not really going to be taking seriously, who the fans won't take seriously because they remember him, and you're giving him all this big hype, this big build-up. Now, this is something that I had seen in, of all places, Kaiju Big Battel when they had their old show. They had somebody come out, they gave him a lot of fanfare when he came out. By the way, does that count as taking another drink? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So Hawkins comes out just like, just this big star, gives the big speech, says he's going to electrify Atlantic City, the joke there being they were in Newark, and says he's going to make a big impact in this first match and win the Intercontinental title. Allow me to give you a play-by-play of the match. The bell rings, Kurt Hawkins turns around, Dolph Ziggler throws a super kick, immediately covers and gets the 3 count. You didn't miss anything.
Yeah, he made a big impact. He made a big impact when he thudded down on the ground after he got his head kicked off.
Yeah, he made a big impact on the mat. I think it's fair to say even TNA makes a bigger impact than Kurt Hawkins.
Yeah. Well, anybody would have done that with Kurt Hawkins.
Yeah, and that's kind of the perfect payoff to a character like that, where you kind of knew everybody was in on the joke, and
Now, the only one
that's
who
where
wasn't
this
in
was
a
going.
yeah.
But it wasn't a waste of a segment because immediately after that grueling, difficult, title-defending encounter, Renee Young gets in the ring, takes her shoes off as always, and interviews Dolph Ziggler.
And Dolph basically shoots himself in the foot and says, "I'm going to take on all comers. Raw, you want this championship belt? Come get it." And I'm assuming that Daniel Bryan is now screaming at the top of his lungs, going, "Oh God, they just risked one of our championship belts to a power-hungry Stephanie McMahon and her evil Santa's Herald."
He might probably be thinking that. I'm sure Shane was thinking that and is probably trying to work out the details. But now the question becomes, who's going to be the challenger? And there's two ways to go with this. Are you going to pick somebody who's going to win the title and immediately defect to SmackDown? Or are you going to pick somebody who is going to lose his challenge? And just thinking about this out loud, I think either way, your ideal pick would be Rusev.
Yeah, Rusev sounds like a decent pick because he isn't doing anything right now. He could face against Ziggler. Oh,
Yeah.
God. Just remembered the last time that Rusev faced against Ziggler. You really want to invite that back onto SmackDown?
It depends. Do they bring the fish?
The fish? I was hoping they'd bring the dog because the dog is better than Ziggy.
No, you'd have to bring the fish.
Okay, the fish. Okay,
Yeah,
bring the fish.
And I guarantee you somebody's going to be posting a little GIF in the comment section of what Rusev did to that fish.
He basically chucked it like a football.
Yeah, got about 15 yards on it. And as long as they use the fish as a weapon in the oncoming match, I think I'll give it 5 stars.
I mean, so Ziggy's already been attacked by Mace. I'm sure a fish is nothing different for him.
At this point, Ziggler's been attacked by Mace, a fish, a dog, and about 5 different bad ideas from creative. He survived.
Also having a bunch of manure dumped on his head.
Oh, yes, there was that. Yeah, thank you, John Cena, for showing the epitome of sportsmanship on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still trying to figure out how exactly did he manage to get that much manure delivered to the arena in a timely manner.
I think it happens the same way that Wile E. Coyote manages to get the Acme Company to set up the anvil exactly 150 feet above a little X on the highway.
Mm-hmm. Well, the X is replaced with the new "You Can't See Me" logo because it's only visible to John Cena, so he knows where to exactly pull the trigger.
Exactly, which does raise the question, by the way, instead of birdseed, what do you put on that to attract Dolph Ziggler?
Let me think here. Sporting equipment?
Ooh, good idea.
I mean, he was a caddy, so he's naturally going to be attracted to golf clubs.
Hey, there you go. No, make the X that marks the spot out of 2 9-irons. That'll do it.
Yeah. Or heck, put his champion, if he's a defending champion, put his championship belt down on that spot.
That's also a good possibility. The only thing that worries me, of course, is that knowing Ziggler and knowing his predilections, that Anvil will land about 6 inches away from him, and he'll leap back about 3 feet and do a triple somersault off of it.
He'll crash onto the announcer's team, yeah.
Yeah. And we thank you for putting up with this diversion, by the way. What happened next?
The next match was, apparently the Headbangers still exist, but then they were attacked by the other people who loaf around in the 7-Eleven parking lot after robbing the Blue Man Group of their shoes, the Usos.
And I thought I had weird pop culture references. Take another drink, everybody.
Seriously, they were wearing blue shoes. It was at least an improvement over the lime green monstrosities they were wearing when they were posing as house painters the last time.
You know what happens here is that Jimmy and Jay arrive like 20 minutes before showtime. They go into the costume department and say, "Hey guys, is there anything left for us?"
Yeah, and
Let me see here. No tights. We singlet. No, don't have any singlets. We got this old thing left over from when TL Hopper was around. You want to try that?
Yeah, and they do. They they come around in street clothes, and apparently some leftover shoes from when Batista was around during his last run, when he was doing
Thankfully,
the
they leave
whole
the skinny jeans in the locker room, mind you.
yeah. But anyway, they won against the Headbangers in a quick match, which they cheated. Got themselves
And
some.
that one kind of surprised me, and I did bring this up in the thread. That kind of surprised me that they would cheat because the Headbangers are a team that's here on a loan. They don't really have credibility in the modern era. They might as well just be those two guys. Do you really need to cheat in a situation like that? And the response I was given was, "You're still trying to establish the Usos, who've spent the last like 3-4 years as faces, as being a bad guy team. So any reminder is a good reminder, I guess."
Well, also they managed to qualify for the Survivor Series tag team, which adds more intrigue into that side. You now have several faces and now a heel team involved in this affair.
And given the hints that the New Day dropped on Raw, there's at least a possibility that the Vaudevillains would be that fifth team. I'm not sure who else is left now that I think about it. So, the Ascension's already been eliminated. The Headbangers are out. Who's left really other than the Vaudevillains? So, if that happens, you have three teams that are rule abiders, although Rhino really can go either way since he's an ECW alumnus. You have two teams that are rule breakers. And that's the kind of dynamic you'll probably see up and down the card on Survivor Series. Certainly when you look at the women's match, already both sides are going to have rule abiders and rule breakers on them.
Yeah, and it's very interesting that they're going in that direction, and it's refreshing. It's odd that they're actually doing the whole heel-face dynamics and actually doing a team dynamic on the show that's supposed to be about teams, but hasn't been in recent years.
Oh yeah, it's going to be fun. I mean, if you watch not just Lucha Underground, but a lot of Lucha Libre, one of the signature matches in Mexico is called Peleas Increíble, which is where they take two teams of two, one Technico and one Rudo on each side, and usually the Technico and Rudo have some sort of personal issue with each other, and you give them an incentive to be on the same team and to work for a common goal. And this is something that we've also seen in the U.S. in the past. ECW did it with Chris Candido and Lance Storm. The WWF did it a lot of times. A specific example being things like the Big Show and the Undertaker in 1999, or they had John Cena and Batista when they were going to be SummerSlam opponents temporarily win the tag titles. It's kind of a favorite of Vince's to do something like that. So the concept of people who don't follow the same ethos being on the same team is nothing new. And it always leads to fun dynamic. It always leads to interpersonal tension. And if you have the WWE Network, by the way, there is an example of this in Survivor Series lore. When you get a chance, watch Survivor Series 1995. It's called the Wild Card Match. And they openly admit, yeah, we put this match together because we know everybody hates each other. We just want to see what happens next. It has, for example, it has the British Bulldog teaming with Shawn Michaels. It has Yokozuna teaming with Razor Ramon. They throw basically their entire upper mid card together in a blender and separate them and see what happens next. It's a good example of the Peleas Increíble format in the U.S., and it's a good preview of what you might see at this Survivor Series.
Yeah, and I'm like the fact that they're building towards Survivor Series while they're doing this show, and we'll see what happens on Survivor Series. But anyway, Dean tries to desperately change the situation going on with Ellsworth, as Ellsworth is continuing to blubber and apologize to Dean, and Dean's going like, hey, we can send each other Christmas cards, he doesn't make the rules, he can't be at ringside.
Yeah, and Ellsworth is saying, please, man, I'll do anything. He's like, no, don't do anything. That's how you can help by not doing anything.
And basically, Ambrose throws him out of the arena while AJ is having to deal with a run-in from Dasha. And then he asked the question, why can't he make it to the ring without someone asking him a dumb question? And he can't wait to entertain the fans.
AJ's sarcasm was on point in this one. You can hear it dripping through his drawl.
Yeah, it was really entertaining. That clip also tells you a lot about AJ's character. It's just basically this guy who thinks he's running the place, but he actually isn't. And that leads us to our main event. And this is the most...
Before we get to the main event, there's one segment that we skipped, by the way, which is backstage in the undisclosed location of Darkness, TM. Randy Orton meets with Bray Wyatt and Luke Harper. And Bray says, I know there are some of us, sideways glance at Harper, who don't think you can be trusted yet, who remember that you are a snake. But a snake is exactly what we need. Someone who can be in league with the devil that we are. And Orton says, I am tired of fighting. I am embracing the darkness. And right at that moment, they do this neat special effect where they have this lightning flash within his eyes. If you remember the SmackDown intro from like 5-6 years ago, it ended with the same visual effect on Randy Orton, this sort of light within his eyes. And it was creepy, and it was effective. But the other thing about that segment is it continued what we said earlier, where Bray thinks he's won. Orton is either legitimate or playing things very close to the vest. Who can tell with Randy Orton? And Harper is the one who's the skeptic of the bunch. And it's even acknowledged by Bray Wyatt, yeah, this isn't unanimous. I get that we might be walking into a trap here, but I think I can control you.
Yeah, he thinks he can control Randy Orton, as we said, but, that's never likely. But Bray is also in a desperate situation right now. His other agent of evil is busy bawling Sami Zayn to death on Raw.
And his backup other agent of evil is currently nursing an injury back at the compound. Let's not forget that there's still a certain Redbeard out there.
Yeah. So now basically Bray is underhanded at this point in staffing of the evil. He's just got Harper, and now he has got Orton doing his best Sith Lord impression.
Well, let's be honest. He's more shorthanded. Bray Wyatt never stopped being underhanded.
Yeah. Well, he absorbed his power, so he can't really stop if he wanted to.
But wait, whose power did he absorb? I feel like I thought T.J. Perkins was the person who was into the 8-bit video game references. Whose power did Bray Wyatt absorb all of a sudden?
Let's see. Kane, he absorbed the power of Undertaker. He took some of the power of his druids.
And as a reminder, we all saw how well that went for him.
Yeah. So a lot of different places. I don't know how many followers he has right now in the compound. I mean, heck, even Sanity could be potentially the works of Wyatt.
Ooh, now there's an idea. I think we can all agree that at least the leader of Sanity has the beard for the job.
Yeah, I mean, Eric Young went completely insane all of a sudden, and there's no explanation for it apart from the fact that
he spent 12 years in TNA.
Well, the bookers in TNA are already insane, but
yeah, I mean, he was at TNA almost from the inception. I'd say that any doctor in the world would clear him from that one.
I mean, yeah, the scripts basically have come alive and demonically possess the people who are employed there. I mean,
yeah, but enough about the Hardys.
Yeah, well, I was actually referring to Josh Matthews in this case.
Josh Matthews has been possessed by the spirit of boredom when I hear him on there. He sounds like he is going through the motions on commentary more than anything else. He also sounds like his voice deepened about an octave. I don't know when that happened.
I mean, I think he got a frog stuck in his throat because he's trying to sound like Dick Vitale.
Ooh, there's a comparison.
Yeah, that's my comparison to him. It's like, oh, he's trying to sound like Dick Vitale, that college basketball announcer.
Take another drink, everybody.
Yeah. But that segment was really fun and enjoyable, and then we had the main event segment, which I was shocked by. Dean was motivated in this match. He actually sold things.
I've been saying that for a long time, that Dean Ambrose is somebody and it's a fault of his, but it is it's a fault of a lot of people. It is somebody who lets the excitement he has dictate his output in the ring, and we've seen this. I think for those who remember back in the day, Carlito was probably the biggest defender of this, where you get some people who, I mean, not everyone can be John Cena and put out 100% at every show. Some people will see that they're being dealt a bad hand, and they will respond accordingly. Ambrose has had that weakness in the past. It's hard to tell if he still has it because now he's finally getting some material to work with. And you can tell that being handed James Ellsworth and saying, "Here, we are giving you a human prop for your feud with AJ Styles," you can tell that suddenly the light went off in his head and he's thinking, "I can do something with this." And it has brought out the best in him.
I also got to think that Ellsworth is helping out on the segments as well because he's playing his hand just as well. He's actually,
sure, yeah.
Yeah. He's cutting better promos than Seth Rollins is right now. The only difference... Yeah.
You say that like it's a bar to clear. I mean, the real thing is, that is sort of the feeling behind it. And now we get into, again, SmackDown versus Raw. We know that on Raw, there is this sense that something could go wrong. There's this sense of not embracing the liveness, of embracing this as a TV show more than a live event. So they lay out everything word for word. I'm sure they have rehearsals in the back beforehand. So when Seth Rollins gives this droning interview where he punctuates words and he draws out his sentences, that's not Tyler Black saying that. That's not Colby Lopez saying that. That is the character Seth Rollins, and it adds a bit of disingenuity to it. And ironically, on Raw, the people who seem immune to it the most are Kevin Owens and Chris Jericho, and they're the ones everybody's kind of excited about now. Whereas on SmackDown, everybody is behaving according to a character. There's no monotony in their promos. Go back to the 3 in the main event segment right now. One of the things I always loved about Arn Anderson was that he didn't talk at someone, he talked to them. And you're seeing that a lot with what AJ Styles is doing to the interviewers, what you mentioned earlier, where that sarcastic blow-off. What Dean Ambrose is doing when he speaks to James Ellsworth, trying to be his life mentor, trying to keep him out of harm's way, be his big brother, I guess is the best way to put it. And also with what James Ellsworth is doing, speaking like an ordinary man in an amazing situation, because he is an ordinary man in an amazing situation.
Yeah, and we have a situation here where Dean is motivated to win this match, and I love what they did early on in the match where they basically, AJ focused on Dean's legs, and Dean focused on AJ's back throughout the entirety of the match.
And it actually, at least in Dean's case, led to callbacks. There was a bit in the middle of the match where Dean went to the top rope from the outside, and you see this exchange done a lot, where someone will get on the top rope, their opponent will charge the corner, and the person on the top rope will instead do a front roll off of the top rope over their opponent to come to their feet. Well, Ambrose did that, but he didn't exactly stick the landing because earlier in the match he had a calf crusher applied to him for about 10 seconds, and that was enough to leave him a bit hobbled.
Yeah, and he actually sold the injury, which was a major difference from usual Dean matches, which is he kind of forgets to sell the injury after a while, and then it leads to these kind of things happening. And well, what happened here is that Ellsworth did play a part in the match. He somehow managed to get through a barricaded locked door out into the arena and started cheering on Ambrose. And Dean is shocked, going, "Oh no!"
Dean Ambrose's look at this point is amazing. He's going, "Oh jeez, you again!"
Yeah, and AJ's also going, "Oh my God, not that guy again." How can I use
Ambrose is over here saying, No, I said go away. What are you doing here? Go away! And then he turns around right into a beautiful enziguri from AJ Styles for a 2 count. And it's
Yeah.
around this time that security realizes there's somebody at ringside who doesn't have a permit to be there. Cue the Benny Hill music as they go running through the arena.
Well, Ellsworth gets chased by a bunch of angry hippos running at full speed throughout the arena.
Yep. As
People,
it should be, mind you.
yeah. If people in New York, New Jersey were wondering why the Richter scale was going off, that was because the security personnel was chasing after James Ellsworth and doing a surprisingly effective job because hippos run very fast in the wild. And James, like the befuddled safari explorer that he is, ended up eventually getting caught by the security personnel, dragged away right in the middle of the Dean Styles match, and AJ decides...
Oh, crikey! It's the black-suited Vipers! I gotta get out of here! Danger! Danger!
But unlike Crocodile Dundee, he gets caught by a wild AJ Styles who decides to do the flashy thing and crush Ellsworth again. Except, unlike last week, it didn't work out so well in AJ's favor.
For the first reason being, he hit Ellsworth a little too hard. Ellsworth went flying over the announce table and into JBL's lap, which, let's face it, is less than what JBL deserves, which means that there was no chance for him to recover, get mad, and attack like he did the previous week. Mm-hmm. But that was only half of the equation.
Yeah, that was only half the equation. He went back into the ring and then got caught by Ambrose.
And this is something where you had to hear it during the replays because I don't think they made a big deal out of it during the live run. You had to catch it when they were doing the instant replay, and Ronaldo was going over it. Styles comes off the ropes, ready to hit the phenomenal forearm, the springboard Superman punch that he does, and Ambrose catches him with a kick coming in. And the cleverness about this is, depending upon what you think happened, either Ambrose was giving the standard kick to the midsection used to set up any DDT, like, say, the Dirty Deeds, or he was repaying the favor to AJ Styles and hit a little lower than he usually does. And during the replay, Ronaldo and JBL were saying that the kick might have been a bit low.
Yeah, I mean, and a little correction there, Ellsworth didn't hit JBL, he hit Mario dead on.
Okay, yeah.
He went a little too hard into the announce table there. Mario was out for like 2 minutes there.
And which left us with the frightening potential of David Otunga being the only one with a live mic.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was already becoming frightening at this point because it looked like David was about to explode out of his shirt.
And God knows he probably had about 6 tons of baby oil on under that vest as it was.
Yeah, so there's already risk there, and JBL's is the one person who's carrying this segment going, oh God, Morrow's equipment's knocked out. I better carry this segment.
Yeah. You can tell whatever happened, it didn't happen the way that they expected. And there's about a 20% chance nobody told the announcers what was going to happen.
But I love the end segment there where Dean beats AJ, gets his #1 contendership shot, and they announced it on Talking Smack. It's going to happen at TLC, so it doesn't interfere with Survivor Series.
Right.
And the second thing was I loved JBL. Usually when JBL goes ballistic, it's a little annoying. This time it was perfect for the situation.
Oh, yeah, because he had every right to be upset. Ellsworth had been told not to come to ringside. He came to ringside anyway, and he indirectly affected the outcome of the match. That is, for once it wasn't JBL doing the, I don't want to hear it from you business. He had a point. And that's been sort of the fun of JBL's interaction with Ellsworth. You remember from the 2 Styles Ellsworth matches, it was the same thing. Because everything is better when the people involved are not caricatures or cartoon characters. You can kind of see where they're coming from. And in this case, you can see where JBL is coming from. Ellsworth had no business being there. He had literally been told not to go. And here he is, changing the outcome of the match again.
Yeah, he changes the outcome of the match, but this time it's in Dean's favor. So we have a role reversal from last week where it benefited AJ. Now it benefits Dean, and Dean now gets to face against AJ. But before then, he's going to have to do some cooperational stuff because of this Survivor Series team thing. And
Right, those two are on the same team. That's going to be interesting.
yeah, it's a combustible element, and you have a bunch of combustible elements over on Raw. You have Kevin Owens, Roman Reigns, and Chris Jericho on the same team.
And you just know Seth Rollins is being added on Monday.
Oh, Lord.
Well, I mean, why wouldn't you if you're Stephanie? That is your franchise pick. That is the number one draft pick you made. You're not giving up on him.
I mean, at this point, yeah, they have to add him in, and well, that's going to be really interesting. They did the
said you had to be excited about it.
Oh, I was excited until the possibility of Rollins being added to the one team, because like I'm worried about the fact that Rollins might accidentally hurt somebody on the SmackDown side, and they don't need any kind of injuries right now.
Yeah, there you go. There is this is a small note, although the announcers did note it. David Otunga did note it, but if you watch, and I'm sure they'll have the replays up on YouTube of this, security at the end finally fishes James Ellsworth's carcass out from behind the announce table and goes to drag him away, dragging him up the entranceway because that's how security works in a sporting event. You drag them along the field. But and as he's being carried away, the camera notices that he is half conscious, unable to resist, but smiling. After all of this trouble he felt inside for what he did the previous week, he feels he atoned.
Yeah, he atoned for what he had perceived that he had done. You know, that he let his emotions get to him last week. Now that he's managed to atone for what he has done, and that's awesome.
And that is, and it's a strange. It was a strange juxtaposition of elements. You know, somebody who had done so wrong, feeling he had done right, and everybody would say, "Yeah, I kind of see where he's coming from." In fact, even Ambrose, runs into Ellsworth and security at the top of the ramp, picks Ellsworth up, and gives him this sort of half hugs to say, "All right, we're cool, brother." And then, of course, drops him like a dish rag on the entrance ramp because he's Dean Ambrose.
Yeah, he's Dean Ambrose. We will always do Dean things. So, what is your grade for this edition of SmackDown, Duke?
Well, let me see. Things that I would give for this, if I were still doing it over on Scott Keith's blog of Doom, where I was Andy PG, but if my face or my voice sounds familiar, best match was definitely the main event. Worst match, and with so many short matches, I would go with Usos headbangers, but something had to be worse. The kayfabe MVP is something I like to do. That it's got to be Ambrose in this case for being able to manage a potential forest fire. And as far as a grade, I'm going to go. I'm going to go 8.5 on this one. It had a lot of short matches, which is not something that I'm as much of a fan of. I felt that some of the matches could use an extra 2 or 3 minutes, but it didn't. It wasn't a touchdown, but it moved the chains, to use a football analogy.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you there because at this point the matches turned out to be really good, and I really think that they moved the chains along nicely. I enjoyed this episode personally, and I thought that it was really nice to see some storyline progression. The matches I thought were really enjoyable. I love the All Japan tag that they did with Nikki Carmella and versus Becky and Alexa there, and that all of the matches had a story, everything went together, and we see that things are moving along nicely on SmackDown, and it's going to be really interesting to see where they go from here because they're clearly building the Survivor Series before they move into TLC, which is their next exclusive pay-per-view on the SmackDown side of things.
And that's kind of awkward because the 2 pay-per-views are 2 Sundays apart. And on top of that, SmackDown's pretty much on their own building it because obviously Raw is under no obligation to help them. It's a SmackDown-only pay-per-view. So either, and this is something we discussed as well, that they're sort of treating next week's Glasgow show as being a major milestone show. But on top of that, one thing that I've liked they've done, and it's reminiscent of Lucha Underground NXT as well, is that they don't adhere to a set date for their next major story advancement. We have seen this with the Styles Ambrose story. We're seeing it with Lynch and Bliss. That their mile markers are not being dictated by what falls on a Sunday. They're being dictated by when the story demands it.
Yeah, and it's something very different that we're seeing in this particular instance because the writing team has their head on straight and they know what exactly goals they have in mind. I mean, we joke that they're already planning their Mania angles.
You joke about that, but you know what? Honestly, by Survivor Series, there is nothing wrong with getting a pencil out and saying, this is what I want WrestleMania to be. And if you ever play Extreme Warfare Revenge or any of the other Adam Ryland games, and you're playing as the WWE, I would say by Survivor Series, you need to sit down and say, what am I looking for at WrestleMania? And say, okay, I have 4 months to get there. I don't think that's an unreasonable goal, and I think it's great that if this is exactly what the SmackDown writers with Ryan Ward and his friends are doing, I think that's great. And I hope Raw wants to do the same thing, but as I discussed earlier today in the thread, Vince McMahon is currently like Al Pacino sitting behind a 10-foot pile of cocaine when it comes to the script.
Yeah, and also you have the interference of younger writers that aren't as experienced as Ryan Ward is when it comes to writing narrative, writing these scripts.
And I'll tell you right now, I think when I see what Ryan Ward is doing, I'm reminded of the late great Chris Kresge and what he did for the WWF in the year 2000 in terms of making even what seemed like throwaway moments matter.
Yeah, and I saw that too when I would watch past WWF events in the year 2000, and everything seemed to interconnect together like that. I have to wonder if they aren't using old Kresge scripts as well to fill in the blanks and go, okay, this is what he did, let's do this, but also tweak a few things here and there.
Well, if they're going to steal from him, what I think they are stealing from him is the most important thing you can steal when you're dealing with an ensemble show like this is, which is everyone should have their own sort of subtext. I mean, as I imagine, and obviously, and they could do this on a whiteboard, they could do this with a binder, however you want it. But what you need to do is you need to look at each character, and you need to, if you're writing that character, look back at what they've done the previous few weeks and say, if I were this character and this is what I have done so far, what is my next logical step? And the story might not always get you. That might mean you have to put somebody else in the story, and that's the way it is. But you need to keep characters internally consistent. And I think going back to what we said earlier about the middle school archetypes that we're seeing here, they've done a very good job of keeping characters internally consistent on SmackDown. Now, I don't get to watch Raw much, so I can't tell you if it's different there or not. But I know what it is on SmackDown, and it's really fun to see because you can kind of predict what people are going to be doing. In fact, we had fun during the commercial break of the main event saying, all right, what's going to be the next trick, the next twist in the turn here based on what we know about Ellsworth, Styles, and Ambrose.
Yeah, and it was really fun to predict the main event like that. And, people were actually having fun watching a wrestling show where, the fun is in Raw thinking, okay, how big of a disaster is it going to be this week?
or how big is the opportunity that they're not going to notice because they have their own agenda? I mean, one thing I've seen talked about a lot on Raw, and here I go, I'm going to Tanya again, is there's a lot of passion, an incredible amount of passion towards what's going on with the women's division on Raw. Not to the, and it's even beyond the degree you see with the women's division on SmackDown or with really any division on SmackDown. It is almost this personal. The term I've seen online is that there's a lot of standing going on, based on the old Eminem song "Take Another Drink, Please," where everybody feels this sort of deep personal. This woman there, knows me and would absolutely love to be around me. I know we could be friends connection going on. And it's led to this passionate feeling that almost comes to a letdown at times because no matter who you're a fan of, you could be a fan of Bailey, you could be a fan of Sasha Banks, you could be a fan of Charlotte or Dana Brooke or even Nia Jax. You look at that division right now and you kind of see a flaw in the presentation of each one. And that can be annoying on Raw. Uh, And it can be annoying in any show, really. And part of the problem is that when the flaws stick out as much as they do, we talked about how the SmackDown main event has the archetypes. Right now, the Raw main event archetype is somebody who used to be Teacher's pet has been left aside in favor of someone new. We're supposed to feel sorry for him. That's not going to work. You need people who are relatable and who behave in a way that makes sense to you. Whether they don't have to be heroes, but you kind of hope they make sense. And that is something SmackDown seems to have a lot more than Raw right now, up and down the card. At the main event scene for Raw, you have flaws. With the women's scene, you have flaws. With the cruiserweight scene, does anybody even have a character outside of Perkins and Kendrick within the cruiserweight scene?
I'm not sure. I mean, Lindsay Dorado has a cat theme.
Oh, there we go. He'd fit in perfectly with Natalia, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
So what we have right now is on Raw a lot of people who are inconsistent, and that can be more frustrating than having evil. With the 2013 Authority storyline that I covered extensively on the Blog of Doom when I was their Raw reviewer, there was a lot of downer episodes, but there was always the sense that everybody was behaving consistently at the top. You don't see that at Raw, and you do see it at SmackDown, and it makes all the difference.
Yeah, it does. And, I would give this episode an A-. I think it was a really enjoyable episode, and they brought up the points that you make, Duke, that they are consistent with their characters, that they are going to an end goal. Raw doesn't go to an end goal. It's just basically all self-contained for one episode, and then it moves on to the next.
Yeah, Biden's made that point today in the thread, and I hadn't thought about it before, but it's pretty right that they go for individual moments. They're not a series. They're a serial.
Yeah, and man, this is so weird. I bet nobody was thinking that we'd be doing all this deep intellectual thinking about a wrestling show.
It takes all kinds to be a wrestling fan, man. There's nothing wrong with it. Remember, two of the most influential people in terms of backstage at WWE are David Otunga and Chris Nowinski, Harvard graduates. There's nothing wrong with going deep into wrestling.
Yep. And this has been a really great discussion. What are your final thoughts, by the way, before we wrap things up?
Okay, my final thoughts on this are things that I've hinted at all along, which is for wrestling to be good, you have to feel like everything meshes. Not just that the heroes act heroic or that the villains act villainous, but everybody has to fit their part in everything they do. Another example, AJ Styles, when he won the title, he added a low blow he didn't need to. He did it because he could, because he is a really annoying bad person. I mentioned, look through history here. Hulk Hogan, his matches all had the same formula of digging deep, finding the extra resolve he kept talking about, and overcoming when the odds looked the worst. Steve Austin always talked about how when the deck was stacked against him, you could fight through it. You could just use the fact that really once somebody had proven themselves to be bad, all bets were off. So he was willing to bend the rules back at them, and that became part of who he was. The Rock was always too cool for school, cruise upon the glitz and the glamour on top of what he did, and it showed in his moves. The People's Elbow is probably the single most style over substance finisher we have had in the history of the WWE, and it perfectly fits who he was. And to bring it all back to today, AJ Styles is the glamour boy with a chip on his shoulder who feels like he has to be the bad guy because it's more fun that way. Dean Ambrose is the tough street fighter who has come up from nowhere. And they are wrestling as their style, they are talking as their style, and that, my friend, has made the difference in the show.
It has indeed. Actually, Dean using his brawling to his advantage, AJ using his character to his advantage. All the characters are aligning together perfectly, and we'll see from here where SmackDown goes, because I'm really excited what they do next week on the day of the election with this Becky Alexa main event and everything else that's going on around it. We don't know who the last team for the SmackDown Survivor Series tag team is. We don't know if there's going to be a shuffle with the men's SmackDown division, if The Miz is going to get desperate and beat somebody up.
And it was suggested that Miz might even defect to Raw, join their team, or go to the point where he defects to Raw and says, "Hey, I'm over here now. Give me a title shot."
Yeah, and that might be a possibility that might happen. And to close out, I think that basically what you have to be right now is be patient, be neutral, and know that from here that things are either going to get better, they might get worse, but wrestling has always been in a theme of ebbs and flows. It's just nobody wants to be in the ebbs for whatever reason, where I'm perfectly content with being in the ebbs right now. SmackDown is in the ebbs, but it's getting somewhere. It's actually going to hit a flow at some point. And they may have already done that now. But patience is something that is very important right now in the world of wrestling. And just be patient. We're drawing into the fall, winter months here. Let's watch the ride that happens with Survivor Series and TLC and the Royal Rumble and the other pay-per-views that are going to be happening before WrestleMania. And let's just enjoy the ride, whether it be crazy or not. I'm really excited because this has been a really awesome show. Thank you, Duke, for coming on in the last minute here.
You're welcome, and hopefully I haven't caused too much alcohol poisoning out there, guys, with with the obscure references that I've thrown or the intellectual diversions. Let me know in the comments if you think that this kind of thing either if it bored you, if it intrigued you, if it annoyed you, because this is the first time I've done a Cage Side Seats podcast, and I'd like to know how I did.
Yeah, and I think you did really well here. Speaking from personal experience, speaking from as somebody who's done his 20th show across Cage Side Speaks and Cage Side Not Live After Smackdown Live. Thank you once again, Tanya, the great Sean Reuter, and Andrew Swift for allowing me to host this guest host era show. Hope I didn't give you any horrible flashbacks via the title.
Let's call it, when we post this, let's call this the obscure pop culture reference drinking game edition.
Yeah, and the first time that Fizzy and Duke have ever worked on a podcast together.
Yep, this was a Lower Deck episode, as they say on Star Trek.
Yep, but this was a good Lower Deck episode, and thank you so much for tuning in on this edition of Live After SmackDown Live. We hope to see you again next time. The regular crew will hopefully be back next week to talk about SmackDown, Raw, and whatever happens during that week, and we'll see you then. But for now, follow this on Cage Side Seats. On the Cage Side Seats Twitter will be posted on YouTube, and
I'll probably provide a link for everybody at my old haunt at Scott Keith's Blog of Doom, blogofdoom.com. Scott Keith, for those who don't know, a critically acclaimed author, has written books on wrestling, such as Wrestling's Made Men and One Ring Circus, and for a long time was considered one of the leaders in the early internet, was one of the top voices back when it was in the rap.sports.pro wrestling days, in fact.
Well, there's a reference for you.
No kidding. By the way, take another drink.
And once again, thank you so much for tuning in for this one. Like I said, the regular crew will hopefully be back next week if Andrew M. Swift isn't so sad about what happens in Game 7, because there is going to be a Game 7 now, and things are tied. And Thank you once again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the next edition of Live After Smackdown Live. And oh, by the way, Cage Side Speaks Hell in a Cell will be on this Saturday, November 5th. For those of you who want to tune in, it will be posted either Saturday or Sunday. And once again, I'll be leading the charge, leading the speakers.
I'll try and stop in if you want me to.
Yeah, I definitely would like it if you came on, Duke.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'll do my best to get there. Although I can tell you, my boys are playing Virginia Tech on Saturday. I might be in the middle of watching a massacre.
Well, anyway, have a good day and night, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for putting up with us.
Yep, on Live After Smackdown Live. Bye.
Bye, everyone.